The polished mahogany table at my parents' house gleamed under crystal chandeliers, perfectly set for another elaborate Thanksgiving dinner. I adjusted my simple blue dress, feeling out of place among designer labels and diamond jewelry. At 32, I was still the family's greatest disappointment, or so they thought. "Sarah, darling." My mother's voice carried across the room with practiced warmth. "We were just discussing everyone's wonderful achievements this year." She gestured to my brother Michael, who sat smugly at the head of the table in his custom Italian suit. I forced a polite smile, thinking about the stack of contracts waiting on my desk at my tiny office. Contracts that would change everything tomorrow morning. But they didn't need to know that. "Not yet. Did you hear about Michael's latest acquisition?" My father beamed. "Symphony Towers, the most prestigious commercial property downtown. 35 floors of pure luxury. Now that's what I call real estate success." Michael raised his wine glass with a practiced smile. "Just closed the deal last week. $400 million. Though I suppose those numbers might be a bit overwhelming for someone who works out of— What was it again, Sarah? That little space above the Chinese restaurant." The table erupted in poorly concealed laughter. My sister-in-law Victoria dabbed her mouth with an embroidered napkin, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "Oh, Sarah, we could always find you something at the company. Perhaps in administration." I took a slow sip of water, remembering the documents I'd signed just yesterday. Symphony Towers wasn't exactly Michael's biggest achievement anymore. He just didn't know it yet. "That's very kind," I replied calmly, "but I'm comfortable where I am." "Comfortable?" My mother's voice dripped with concern. "Darling, you're barely making ends meet in that shabby little office while your brother's running billion-dollar deals. Don't you think it's time to accept some help?" If they only knew that my shabby little office was just a front, a quiet place where I could work without attracting attention while my real empire grew in the shadows. Phoenix Holdings, my company, had quietly become one of the largest commercial real estate investment firms in the country. We operated through a maze of subsidiaries and shell corporations, with my name carefully hidden from public records. "Speaking of Symphony Towers," my cousin James chimed in, "have you seen the renovation plans, Sarah?" "Probably not, since you're not really in our league, but they're absolutely magnificent." I had seen them. In fact, I had rejected them yesterday and ordered new ones. "Actually," Michael leaned forward, swirling his expensive wine, "we're planning to raise the rents significantly. Time to clear out some of the smaller tenants. Make room for more prestigious companies." He smirked. "You might want to start looking for a new office, Sarah. I hear the rent in your building is going up too." Little did he know that I owned that building as well. In fact, I own most of the commercial properties in the business district, all through different shell companies. Tomorrow Michael would learn that Symphony Towers, his crowning achievement, had actually been bought by one of my subsidiaries. The papers were signed, the money transferred. He had unwittingly sold his prestigious property to his unsuccessful sister. "Maybe it's time you grew up, Sarah," my father added. "Join the family business. Michael could use someone to handle the smaller accounts." I thought about my real office, the entire top floor of a sleek downtown tower, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and staff of over 100 people. The office no one in my family had ever seen. "I appreciate the offer," I said quietly, "but I have other plans." "Plans?" Michael scoffed. "Running your little consulting business from that tiny office? While I'm handling billion-dollar real estate portfolios. Come on, Sarah. Know your place." "Tell me, Michael," I couldn't resist asking, "how are things with Symphony Towers?" "Everything finalized." He puffed up with pride. "Of course. Smoothest acquisition ever. The new management takes over tomorrow morning." He raised his glass again. "To success, real success." I smiled, thinking about the meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Yes, to success. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of subtle jabs and condescending advice. My mother lamented my simple wardrobe, while Victoria detailed her latest shopping spree at Gucci. James bragged about his new Porsche, while my father repeatedly reminded everyone how Michael had saved the family business. As I drove home that night, my phone buzzed with a message from my executive assistant, Emma. "Everything's set for tomorrow. The look on their faces will be priceless." I smiled, thinking about the carefully orchestrated revelation I had planned. For years I had worked silently, building my empire while they mocked my tiny office. Tomorrow they would finally learn that success doesn't always wear designer labels or announce itself from the head of a dinner table. In my real office, the one my family had never seen, I reviewed the final documents one last time. The acquisition of Symphony Towers was just the beginning. Through various subsidiaries, Phoenix Holdings now owned 60% of the commercial real estate in the business district, including the building that housed my family's company. Tomorrow they would learn that their new landlord, their biggest competitor, and the mysterious CEO they'd been trying to meet for months was none other than the sister they'd dismissed as a failure. I picked up my phone and dialed Emma. "Make sure the conference room is ready for tomorrow's meeting. Emma, have the photographer ready. I want to capture every moment when my family realizes who really runs this city." As I prepared for bed, I couldn't help but smile at the thought of tomorrow's revelation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with a property deed and a new lease agreement that reads Phoenix Holdings, CO Sarah Mitchell. The real game was about to begin. The next morning I arrived at Symphony Towers at precisely 8:30 a.m., dressed in a tailored Armani suit, a stark contrast to the modest outfits my family was used to seeing me wear. The security guards, already briefed about the change in ownership, nodded respectfully as I entered the building. "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell." Emma greeted me in the private elevator, handing me a tablet with the morning's schedule. "Your brother and the board members arrived early. They're quite anxious about meeting the mysterious new owner." I smiled, reviewing the security footage on my tablet. Michael was pacing the conference room, straightening his tie repeatedly. My father sat at the table, checking his watch every few minutes. They had no idea their world was about to turn upside down. "How long have they been waiting?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. 45 minutes, Emma replied with a slight smirk. "Mr. Mitchell has mentioned his important position approximately 7 times to the receptionist." The elevator doors opened to the top floor, my floor. The space had been completely renovated, featuring sleek modern design and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the city. A far cry from the tiny office my family loved to mock. "They're all yours," Emma said, gesturing toward the conference room. I took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy glass doors. The conversation inside stopped abruptly as every head turned toward me. The look of confusion on their faces quickly morphed into disbelief. "Sarah." Michael stood up so quickly he knocked over his water glass. "What are you doing here? This is a private meeting." I walked calmly to the head of the table, setting my briefcase down with a quiet click that seemed to echo in the stunned silence. "Good morning, everyone. I apologize for the delay. Shall we begin?" "Begin." My father's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "Sarah, this is highly inappropriate. We're here to meet with the CEO of Phoenix Holdings about the Symphony Towers acquisition." "Yes," I smiled, taking my seat at the head of the table. "You are." Victoria let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, I get it. You're working here now? As what, a secretary?" "Not exactly." I nodded to Emma, who began distributing folders to everyone present. "I'm Ann Mitchell, CEO of Phoenix Holdings. Though you might know me better as your sister Sarah." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael's face had gone pale as he frantically flipped through the documents in front of him. Our father seemed frozen in his chair, while Victoria's perfectly maintained smile had completely disappeared. This is impossible," Michael finally stammered. "Phoenix Holdings is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. You work in a tiny office above a Chinese restaurant." "That office?" I clicked a button, bringing up images on the conference room screens. "It's one of our meeting spaces for local clients. Phoenix Holdings operates in 38 countries, Michael. We own this building, and as of today we own Symphony Towers too." "No." My father found his voice, though it shook slightly. "No, this must be some kind of mistake. You can't possibly own the majority of commercial real estate in the business district?" I finished for him. "Including the building that houses your company?" "Actually, I do. Through various subsidiaries and shell corporations, of course. That's why you never saw it coming." Michael's hands were trembling as he reviewed the documents. "The lease agreements, the acquisition papers, they're all legally binding," I confirmed. "Signed and executed. Phoenix Holdings is now your landlord, Michael. And yes, we will be implementing those rent increases you were so excited about at dinner last night." Victoria stood up, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. You can't do this to family. This is family. I raised an eyebrow. Interesting that you mention family now, Victoria. Last night you were quite comfortable mocking my shabby little office and suggesting I work in administration. Sarah, my father's voice had taken on a pleading tone I'd never heard before. Be reasonable. We can work something out. We're your family. I stood up slowly, buttoning my jacket. Yes, we are family. The same family that spent years belittling my choices, mocking my supposed failure and treating me like I was beneath you. The same family that never once bothered to ask what I was really building. But why? Michael's voice cracked. Why go to all this trouble? Why hide everything? I walked to the window, gazing out at the city skyline, my skyline. Because you taught me an important lesson, brother. You showed me that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch out for. The rent increases, Victoria whispered, realization dawning on her face. Our lease is up for renewal next month, I confirmed. And yes, the new terms will reflect current market rates. Emma will provide you with the details. Sarah, please. My father stood up, his authority completely evaporated. We can discuss this. Come back to the family business. We can work together. I turned to face them, my voice firm but calm. I already have a family business, Dad. I built it myself while you were all too busy looking down on me to notice. The meeting continued for another hour, during which the full scope of my empire became clear to my stunned family. Phoenix Holdings didn't just own their buildings. We controlled the majority of commercial real estate in 3 major cities. The little sister, they dismissed, had built something far bigger than they could have imagined. As they prepared to leave, thoroughly defeated, I called out one last time. Michael. He turned, his earlier arrogance replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Next family dinner. Remember, success doesn't always wear designer labels or brag about itself at the dinner table. After they left, I stood at the window watching the city spread out below. Emma appeared at my side with a coffee. Was it worth it? She asked quietly. All these years of hiding your success? I thought about the decades of condescension, the dismissive comments, the patronizing offers of real jobs. Then I thought about the empire I'd built, the thousands of employees who relied on me, and the changes I could now implement in the real estate market. It wasn't about revenge, I said finally. It was about proving that success comes in many forms, and you don't have to follow their path to build something meaningful. Over the next year, the family dynamics shifted dramatically. Michael's company struggled to adjust to the new market rates, eventually downsizing to a smaller office. Victoria stopped bragging about her shopping sprees when her husband's real estate investments started falling apart. My father, who had watched silently for years as his son mocked his daughter's choices, finally told me how proud he was, not of my financial success, but of how I'd handled it all. You built something real, he said during a quiet lunch weeks after the revelation. Something that matters beyond just money and power. He was right. Phoenix Holdings had become more than just a vehicle for proving my worth to my family. It was a force for change in the real estate market, promoting sustainable development and fair leasing practices. These days, when people ask about my path to success, I tell them the truth. Sometimes the best response to those who underestimate you isn't to prove them wrong immediately. It's to build something so magnificent that when they finally realize their mistake, it doesn't matter anymore. As for that tiny office above the Chinese restaurant, I kept it. Not because I need it, but as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and the biggest success stories often start in the smallest places. Yesterday, I signed the papers to acquire another major property portfolio. The seller? A certain real estate company owned by my brother. He didn't know it was me buying again. Some lessons, it seems, take more than once to learn. But that's a story for another family dinner. 1 month after the revelation, my family tried a different approach. Michael invited me to dinner at an upscale restaurant, the kind where he used to love flaunting his wealth. But this time something was different. He was already waiting when I arrived, nervously adjusting his tie that was slightly less expensive than usual. Sarah. He stood up quickly, pulling out my chair. Thanks for coming. I sat down, noting how the power dynamics had shifted. Gone was the arrogant older brother who loved to belittle my achievements. In his place sat a man who finally realized he'd underestimated his little sister. "I've been doing some thinking," he began, his voice uncharacteristically humble. "About everything. About how we treated you. About how I treated you." I stayed silent, letting him continue. "The thing is, I never really understood what success meant. I thought it was all about showing off, about proving something to everyone else. But you built something incredible without needing anyone's validation." "It's interesting," I replied, taking a sip of water, "how quickly perspectives can change when the tables turn." He flinched slightly but pressed on. "I need your help, Sarah. The company, we're struggling. The new market rates, the changing landscape. I don't know how to adapt." "And you think coming to dinner and apologizing will fix everything?" "No," he admitted, looking down at his plate. "But I'm hoping it's a start. I'm hoping my sister might be willing to teach me what real success looks like." I studied him for a moment, remembering all the times he'd laughed at my tiny office, all the family dinners where he'd made sure I felt small and insignificant. But I also remembered something else. A little boy who once stood up for his sister on the playground before money and status poisoned his perspective. "Meet me tomorrow," I said finally. "Not at Symphony Towers. At the Chinese restaurant." The next morning I sat in my old office above the restaurant, the smell of dim sum wafting through the windows. Michael arrived exactly on time, looking somewhat lost in this modest setting. "Why here?" he asked, glancing around at the simple furniture and faded walls. I stood up and walked to a small filing cabinet in the corner. "Because this is where it all started." I pulled out a worn leather folder. 10 years ago I sat in this office with nothing but an idea and determination. While you were busy showing off your success, I was here learning the most valuable lesson in business. Which is that true power doesn't need to announce itself. I opened the folder, revealing my first business plan for Phoenix Holdings. "Every empire starts somewhere, Michael. Mine started in this shabby little office that you loved to mock." Over the next few hours I showed him everything, how I'd built my company from scratch, how I'd learned to operate in the shadows, how I'd turned every underestimation into motivation. For the first time in our adult lives, my brother actually listened. As the weeks passed, our relationship began to transform. Michael started coming to the Chinese restaurant regularly, not as a wealthy real estate mogul, but as a brother eager to learn from his sister. I taught him about sustainable development, about building relationships instead of just making deals, about finding success that matters beyond the bottom line.